Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good, good. Well, in light of the peace deal that's come out between with Trump kind of overseeing it with Israel and Hamas, the Palestinians, all the Arab countries. Just congratulations for getting the hostages back. We thought we'd talk about the deal and even some objectivist reaction to it.
Right. So, what we want to do first is give a general idea of what the plan involves when it was signed. So, it was announced on September 29th and signed on October 9th, and it was led by Donald Trump. And it goes by the name of the Gaza Peace Plan or the 20-point plan. And it also involves Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt as mediators to the plan. So already in the news, you're seeing Egypt helping look for the remains of Israeli hostages in Gaza. So some of these countries will get involved later. But the plan involves basically three or four stages. The first stage is the ceasefire, which we're currently in right now. And it involves humanitarian aid, which should be coming or should be flowing. I think there's not Hamas or the Palestinians are complaining about not enough truckloads arriving, but there are some truckloads arriving, so aid is flowing a little bit. So phase two would involve the demilitarization of Gaza. So that involves the disarming of Hamas and Israel pulling back their forces, and there being this like international security force coming in and training Palestinians and Gazans to become their own police force. And that's kind of getting into phase three, which would be the next governance of Gaza. And then the reconstruction of Gaza. So there's 20 points to this plan. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do want to highlight a couple because I think they're being overlooked by some objectivists. And one of those is point six, which is the disarming of Hamas and, Hamas soldiers who give up their weapons and give up the fight would get amnesty, or they could be relocated to another country if they wish. So that's one point, is that in the plan, there is this point for disarming Hamas. And then point 13 is probably the most important one, which says there will be no role for Hamas in Gaza. They won't be a political entity anymore. All their tunnels will be destroyed. Their infrastructure will be destroyed. They won't have a role in Gaza at all. There will be this international security force that would gain control of Gaza and
Tony
take
Blair.
over there. Yeah, and then there would be this board that would be in charge of advising the new government and so forth. So I just want to point those out because I think later on you'll see that people like Onkar and Yaron, they're not really giving that consideration.
Great. Well, yeah, I think really we can jump right into the quotes. The Ayn Rand Institute's Onkar Ghate and Elan Journo talked about the deal, and both of them gave their opinion on it. Let's start with Onkar's take.
My basic reaction is this is probably close to the best that you could ask for in the current context, given the whole reaction of the Western world after October 7th. And I think we have to come back and talk about that. So in other words, I think it's good given the context, but that's such a low bar that in the end, it's not something that should be celebrated. It's a kind of ceasefire, but the side that needed to be defeated and defeated, and it recognizing its defeat, and the Western world, led by Israel and America, demanding its defeat. That's what had to happen. That's what this deal is so much not about. That you can be glad that there's a ceasefire, but you can't think long term that this is what was necessary and needed after October 7th.
Yeah, so I think there's a really fundamental problem here regarding context, because Onkar acknowledges that this is close to the best solution we could get within the current context. So my question is, what is he demanding? An out-of-context solution?
He wants the world to be different.
Yeah, this is idealism gone haywire. You need to resolve problems within the context of your own world, the real world. So, and that's the fundamental of objectivism, is objectivity. What is real?
And taking context into account.
Yeah, sticking to the context, the full context. And the full context is that Israel has to maintain her allies around the world. And so this is the best solution, probably. I mean, it's a very good solution, in my opinion. It's not, ideal. But we don't live in the ideal world. So it's the practical. The moral is the practical. And the other thing that they're not recognizing is that this plan does acknowledge that Hamas needs to surrender, needs to be disarmed. So he says that Hamas, well, they're saying that the plan doesn't recognize the long-term solution, which is getting rid of Hamas. Well, it does that. And if Hamas doesn't disarm, doesn't go away, doesn't give up political power, then Israel will be able to step back in and wage war on them and continue crushing them.
On one hand, to be fair to them, they only recorded it a couple of days into the deal, but that goes both ways. I mean, they already, talked about it not being a good deal and being disappointed in it. I agree with you. The best possible deal in reality is the best deal possible. And so, the idea, I keep going back to Rand's, they're putting the I wish over the it is. It'd be great if we were in this perfect world where everyone loved Israel as much as they did, and the Israeli people didn't even care about the lives of the hostages. I mean, I'm not even sure that would be a good thing, but it would make more to their point. But that is some of the context that had to be considered in this deal. The Israeli people wanted the hostages back. And
the other part of the context here is that Israel wanted to achieve a couple different goals. They wanted to get the hostages back, and they wanted to defeat Hamas. So they're getting the hostages back. That's half of the main goal here. And then in phase 2, if the plan succeeds, they'll get their second goal. Hamas will be defeated. So I don't know what they're talking about here. I mean, Onkar acknowledges that this is the best solution we can hope for in this context. Well, okay, then that's that. Why are you complaining about not having an ideal world? We can sit here on our thumbs and up our butts and just talk about the ideal all day long and get nothing done. But at some point, you got to put pen to paper. You got to act in the real world. You got to do things. Okay, so I think another thing that they said is contextually good is a low bar. What the good is the good. You're nitpicking here, and they're going to be accused. They're going to acknowledge that they're accused of nitpicking in another clip. But yes, that's what they're doing. They're just saying like the good isn't enough. So
I'd hate to think that it's because they don't want to give Trump a big win.
Yeah, I don't. It could be TDS here. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm just going to point out what I see as the problems in their rhetoric here.
Sure. And then Onkar asks Elan Journo his view, and Elan is even more negative about the deal.
Yeah, my reaction is similar, but maybe more emphasizing the negatives. Because what this brought to mind for me, not in every detail, but just in a core feature of it, is the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. So clearly, Israel isn't retreating in a ignominious way from Gaza. It has accomplished significant gains, but one feature is in common that I think is significant, which is this is not really evidence of Israel accomplishing its stated goal at the outset, which was to totally defeat Hamas.
Okay, so this is, I mean, Elan says he's being more negative, but he's basically just reiterating what Onkar is saying, is that, they're not achieving their goal of defeating Hamas. So, again, I'm saying in phase 2, that's part of the plan, is to defeat Hamas, disarm them. They surrender, they give up political power, they go away, they dissolve. Now, if that doesn't happen, obviously Israel is going to continue crushing them. So they're just evading at least 2 points in the plan. And I guess they're just going to say that they don't believe that the plan is good, will be enacted.
But I also think there's a provision in the plan that Israel can go back and if Hamas doesn't disarm, that they can go right back in there. And now with the hostages back.
Yeah. So, and they also evaded the other goal, was to get the hostages. So, which is happening, which they've got the living hostages, which is fantastic. And they're working on getting the dead ones. So I also wanted to point out something they might not be thinking about. In terms of long-range planning, Israel has a PR problem, which a lot of people acknowledge. And this could be a very good opportunity, this plan, for a narrative switch. Israel could gain favor internationally by sticking to the plan, and then when Hamas violates it, then they get international favor. They say, look, we wanted peace, but Hamas is violating it. Hamas won't surrender, won't disarm. And so then Israel can go back into Gaza and finish the job with even more friends surrounding them and supporting them.
And part of the masterstroke is bringing these other Arab countries in that had previously been supporting Hamas to some degree, and having them be part of the enforcement mechanism, and letting them know that, whatever we gave Qatar, if Hamas doesn't go along, they're going to lose access to our base or whatever else their security guarantee from us. So, just because Hamas didn't disarm in 3 days, they did sign the deal saying they'd have no role in the future government. So, whether they call it a different name or something like that is a different issue, but they seem to have accepted that Hamas is not going to be the dominant political entity in Gaza anymore.
You're talking about the nations that support the plan, because I don't think Hamas has signed on to phase 2 yet, right?
I don't know if they've signed on to. I thought they'd signed the deal, but it's possible that you're correct.
Yeah, I think there's Hamas. I think I could be wrong, but the last thing I heard was that Hamas rejected the part about disarming. But I guess we'll find out. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
because there's going to be a lot of pressure, international pressure on them to go away.
And to your, this is the clip you referenced. Elan continues and wants us to know that they're totally not nitpicking.
Hamas is still around, and this might seem like some people might view this and say, well, that's nitpicking. They're really defeated. They're not going to be able to do it on October 7th anytime soon. Well, all of which is true. But the crucial piece that's overlooked is that Hamas is driven by an idea. They have not given up on that idea. That's the destruction of Israel because of their Islamic totalitarian vision. They have not given that up. And Islamists, we know, not only in Gaza, but in other parts of the world, they think long range.
So he's saying that Hamas thinks long range and they won't give up the idea of destroying Israel. Okay. I mean, but that part of the plan is to make them go away. So you have to deal with the plan. And if the plan doesn't work, then again, Israel can go back in and finish the job.
Exactly. And the idea that, Israel, they can't do it, or Hamas can't do an October 7th for a while, that's actually a very good thing. Israel's history has been marked by, 10, maybe 15 years max in between conflicts. And so, yeah, if we can get another 10 to 15 years, that's a good thing.
And it's not a very major point to say your enemy has long range strategy or long range thinking. I mean, any army or organization worth their salt has long range thinking capabilities. They think what about 100 years from what's going to happen 50 to 100 years from now? They want to create a civilization or they want a nation to last. So of course they're thinking long range. But so is Israel. I mean, is the implication that the West doesn't think long range? I think the West is thinking much more strategically and long range than Hamas. I mean, look at Hamas. Hamas is almost dead in the water.
I can understand them saying that in the West, people have had a tendency to appeasement or short range thinking to get them past the moment. But I mean, yeah, that goes on everywhere, even with the people that have long range strategies. You still make decisions in the moment. And, what was their alternative plan for peace or getting the hostages back? They just wanted Israel to go in and, starve the Gazans like they were being accused of in the international community and genocide. And, Israel had to weigh that with what kind of relations. Was it actually better to get the hostages back and have better relations with these Arab countries that were going to apply pressure to Hamas? You can't just say, you had to destroy Hamas. It's the only way to do it. These are geopolitical decisions that take a lot of things into account. And they don't even know all the information that Israel or Trump and all the international players were privy to.
Yeah, and so we've already had Onkar say that this is the best solution in the current context. So, why are they complaining about long range thinking and all of this? I mean, it's the best solution within this context. And the context includes, the steps needed, the steps necessary to achieve your long range goals. One thing I like about the plan is that it has the necessary steps included to achieve the long range goal of defeating Hamas and creating, a safe, peaceful Gaza. There is a plan.
And there's a provision for if Hamas doesn't accept.
Yeah, it might not work because of Hamas, and then you need to go back to war. But that was the state before. So all that would happen is you'd revert back to the status quo. But here you got Trump and all of his friends and allies around the world. I mean, so many nations are supporting this. It's incredible. You got all these people supporting this plan to finally achieve peace between Israel and Palestinians. So I think it's an amazing accomplishment on Trump's part. Clearly, he's used whatever leverage he has against Qatar, against everybody in the Middle East, to achieve this goal and to get very close so far to just a lasting peace.
Yeah. And he used the same kind of pressure tactics he uses on other countries with either tariffs or threatening to, cut off aid or whatever he does. And he uses leverage. But in this next clip, Onkar complains that the peacekeepers, like the Egyptians, can't be trusted.
Aid and send peacekeepers into here. And that's, there's a way in which you can say that something like Egypt is better than Hamas. It's not a complete totalitarian society, but it's not a free society either. And to abandon the idea that that should be the goal, and that if you have any respect for any individuals in that region outside of Israel, it's the respect should be if they want to work to build a free society, we would be on the side of that. And now that it has been abandoned, and maybe you can get some kind of thing that is relatively peaceful in the way that the Egypt and Israel are now not at war anymore. But that's not the any longer champion the ideal of a free society, and that thinking of it in those terms is part of what I find depressing about the whole thing, that's been abandoned.
This is a little crazy to me because what was that?
Goalpost moving alert. Now it has to be like the ideal of a free society for him even not to be depressed about, the hostages being freed and Hamas agreeing to disarm.
Well, it's like they've learned nothing from Iraq and Afghanistan, where we had the goal of creating free societies. The goal isn't creating free societies. The goal is to create societies that don't want to kill us. Achieving peace.
It's incremental. You can still hold the ideal, but we got to start where we're at.
Exactly. Again, this is them promoting or seeking an ideal over the practical. So, or even the moral. The ideal isn't to go in and force freedom upon people who don't want it. The ideal is to go in and convince them not to kill us. Say, look, we don't want war. We want peace. How are we going to achieve peace here? How are we going to coexist? And that's what this plan seeks. It doesn't seek necessarily a free Gaza, although we are getting this split. I guess there's going to be two Gazas, and they're going to compete against each other, I guess, now. But the goal isn't just to go in and change their whole culture and say, look, you need to switch from being Islamic totalitarians to freedom-loving Americans. That's crazy talk. So the goal is to go in and say, we don't want war. Let's seek some peace. Let's stop fighting each other.
I'm curious I wonder which countries count as free societies or which don't, what the criteria is, and if there's any downside to open immigration from unfree societies. Since that's such a big deal to not have unfree people helping with the peace process.
Oh, I see. So we need to create more people who can come to America and work in the fields.
I don't even know about that, but just that, if he's so depressed because it's what he chooses to focus on, that it's not the ideal, and that, it's so bad that we have people from a non-free society. And there is even a provision in one of the 20 points that they, aspire to, be a freer people. And so, yes, but I mean, they were teaching killing Israelis in their school. So that is going to take time to change. It takes time for a culture to change. I mean, Yaron says it'll be at least 100 years before objectivism has any impact, but the Palestinians are supposed to change overnight, and the Egyptian guards. I mean, it's just, these are unrealistic goals. And it's just, again, it's kind of a way to, he's depressed. I hope it's not because Trump got a big win.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple points here. So he may be depressed because he wants to respect the enemy, the people who are not in Israel, the Gazans, the Palestinians. He wants to respect them and seek freedom for them. And that's like bashing your head against a wall. Why are you doing that when they don't want freedom? They don't respect themselves. So why are you respecting the enemy?
And is Israel supposed to stay at war until Egypt becomes free?
Yeah. It smells of sacrificial thinking. Like, why are you even putting mental energy into this idea? It's you should be seeking your own self-interest, which is to crush the enemy and then make them surrender. So, which is what this plan is attempting to do. But you referenced a point in the 20-point plan, and it's point 18, and it's all about having interfaith dialogue to change mindsets and narratives to find a peaceful coexistence. So, I mean, that's one of the points that I think, was it Yaron or Elan mentions in their talk, and they like that plan. That point, they said that's one of the better points, and I agree. I mean, that's what needs to happen to achieve peaceful coexistence, not freedom-loving societies. So that point is good, and it is aimed at the right solution because you need peace, to end the war.
We'll call the Free Societies Phase 4 of the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, when they achieve statehood and then revert back to Islamic totalitarianism.
So along these lines, then, Elan Journo says the deal is actually an inversion of justice.
I think this deal is in so many ways an inversion of justice for some of the reasons we mentioned, which is leaving Hamas undefeated, I think is unjust to its victims, unjust to the Palestinians who don't want to live under Hamas and who are, at least for the time being and for the foreseeable future, going to remain under Hamas power, which is brutal. And I think the absence of an outcry about the return of its daily brutality, I think, is horrifying commentary on people in the West who were complaining about Israeli conduct both before and after the war.
So Elan's point is that this plan is unjust, and he says it's unjust to its victims and to the Palestinians. So I want to address the 2 points. Its victims, the Israelis, are being returned. The hostages are being returned. So it's not unjust to the victims. It's actually finding justice. It's giving justice to the victims. It's returning them to their families, and then ultimately it's going to be punishing Hamas by either convincing them to disarm or going back to war and crushing them.
I'm sure they would say that it's an inversion of justice because they haven't secured what's necessary for Israel to be secure long term, and it could invite something else in 10 or 15 years, and that it doesn't do enough to let Hamas know that they've been thoroughly defeated. And that just, some of that's against human nature. It's like even the Japanese after World War II, they were defeated, but they still kept hold of some sort of pride. Or you don't do that to people. You can't just totally crush it out of people. I mean, we were actually kind to Japan after World War II, and that's part of what changed them.
Yeah, this might be a good time to bring up Mitch Schneider's Facebook post on October 10th. Because he addresses the idea that Israel hasn't won, hasn't achieved victory. And he says he's heard that Israel lost the PR war, but he points out a lot of things that Israel has won, has succeeded at. Namely, Israel has destroyed the ring of fire that surrounded them, which was like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and Iran. All of these things over the last 2 years are being neutralized and destroyed. And so Israel is like the dominant force now in that region and acting the way they want, doing what they want. And so I really liked Mitch Schneider's post. He basically points out that Hezbollah is finished, Nasrallah is dead, the Iranian nuclear program has been set back by years. They suffered a crushing attack. Assad's regime has collapsed and the land bridge is gone. He also says that the Houthis have been neutralized. And now we have this ceasefire and potential disarming of Hamas. So one quote I liked from Mitch's post is, quote, "While the world was busy judging us, we were busy surviving. And not just surviving, winning. Fundamentally, decisively, historically winning." He also says the world can have its hashtags. We'll take our sovereignty. So I kind of like the way he writes that. I like his rhetoric. I like the way he puts together his argument here. He's basically showing that, the importance of an Israel sticking together, having sovereignty, acting in its own self-interest, defeating its enemies that surround them, and then just putting the final death blow on Hamas, which is this peace plan, which is supported by the world. So Hamas is facing intense international pressure to go away.
At one point, he says that, you all can have the PR war. We'll actually take the real victory. And that's why, this whole idea that somehow if we, make Hamas say that they've been totally defeated, that they'll be totally defeated or something like that. It's about, winning on the ground and the fact that Israel's going to control like 58% of Gaza. It's just going to make them easier to defend themselves going forward.
But yeah, there's a lot of people out there who are just talking. That's his point about losing the PR war. Well, they don't care about the PR war. They care about the ground war. They care about the air war, bombing and fighting on the ground and getting rid of the tunnels and getting rid of Hamas and rescuing the hostages. That's what's important. And that's what Israel's been focusing on. And in order to isolate Hamas, they've been on this grand strategy of talk about thinking long range. Israel is the one thinking long range by first annihilating all the potential support function or support governments and institutions, for Hamas, things that Hamas would be nothing without. And so that's the issue here is, who's thinking long range, who's getting stuff done on the ground. And it's clearly Israel is the one doing it. The other thing that Elan said about the inversion of justice is that this plan is unjust to the Palestinians who don't want Hamas around. Okay, well, the plan is trying to get rid of Hamas, and on one hand, and on the other hand, why do you care? Why are you thinking sacrificially about the enemy? These are people who live and work under Hamas.
Well, I understand wanting the individuals against Hamas to be able to rise as part of getting rid of Hamas or whatever. But I mean, that's the situation these people had been living in for not just 2 years, but much longer than that. I mean, I remember when Hamas made the Fox News journalist convert for him to be released. So, but in this next clip,
let me say one more thing. But also, so in my view, I would never care. I don't care about people or the plan being unjust to the enemy civilian population who may or may not be against Hamas. But also, I think the plan is just to everybody, to the people in Gaza who don't want Hamas around. It's helping them by putting all this pressure on Hamas to go away, to stop doing what they're doing. And that's justice to anyone who doesn't want Hamas around. Also, I've seen in the news recently, there's these other militias forming in Gaza and going around and trying to take power back from Hamas. So it's already starting to happen.
Well, they're being summarily executed in many cases, so we'll have to see how it shakes out. But you're broadening it. You're talking about how the deal is good for anyone who values justice. Well, they broaden it as well. They say the deal is an affront to anyone who values their life in free societies.
There's no way to look at the history of the Palestinian movement in all of its forms, religious and nationalist, and think that freedom is really what they're after. So this is a further whitewashing. Whitewashing is probably too soft a term for this, of what the Palestinian movement has been about for all of its history. And now, especially in the aftermath of October 7th and this devastating war, the idea that would be capping off the ceasefire deal, which is supposed to lay a path for freedom, for peace, I think it's an affront. It's an affront to anyone who really values their life and values the idea of free societies, which are the only means of getting to the kind of economic prosperity that people have been talking about as a possibility for the Palestinian society for decades, which has been a possibility squandered over and over.
So first, I want to point out how Elan sort of stumbled over the phrase "lay a path for free," and then he says for peace. He's confusing or conflating freedom with peace in his own mind, and that's a problem. Like, he doesn't have it straight. So I think he needs to decide.
It's possible they may believe peace isn't possible without freedom. From giving them the benefit of the...
Which is wrong. I mean, we're at peace with several unfree countries. And on top of that, doesn't ARI think that America is basically fascist and we have a dictator for president? I mean,
it depends what news cycle you catch them on.
So freedom...
for this, we're a free society.
You can be partially free and partially slave. So I don't see what the issue is here regarding the ideal, the goal in Gaza. It should be clear. It's just peace. We want peace there. And if it requires letting them have their dictatorship, fine. But the dictatorship has to be friendly to the West.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand what deal they wanted. What they wanted, no deal. They wanted just to go in there and, the truth is Hamas is somewhat embedded in the Palestinian people after 20 years of being the governance. You're on social programs there. You're getting it from Hamas. You may not like the setup, but that's what they're used to. And this whole idea that they just had to, ignore that and just keep fighting. I mean, Israel would have had to do something closer to genocide to achieve what they seem to, this ideal that they seem to be pushing for.
Well, that's the big question, is how do you deal with an enemy who's embedded, like ideologically just entrenched in the culture? They've been trained and taught all their lives to hate Israel and to want to destroy Jews. But then on the other hand, Onkar and Elan seem to want to achieve freedom there. That seems backward or contradictory. Like, why is your goal to make these people free when they are embedded with totalitarian ideology and dictatorship? They are not free. They are slaves to this religion that they have.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was alluding to at the beginning. Their plan involves somehow like all the students in universities coming to appreciate Israel and not having this, pro-Palestinian take. And it's just not the world we live in.
They're the only ones. They're the only ones who haven't learned the lesson from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's like, yeah. How many countries do we have to try to turn peaceful before they realize the Middle East, these Islamic nations, they're not going to be free?
I still think there is potential for them to be. I just, but it's going to be a process. And that, the idea that we couldn't get the hostages back until that was achieved was going to kill the hostages.
This whole idea of turning other nations into free nations, it has some fundamental problem to it, because we can't even achieve full freedom here in America. Mm-hmm. Why don't we just focus on making America free and stop focusing on converting the world to some ideal freedom that we don't even understand ourselves?
Yeah, their view is closer, more akin to something like the neocons, which generally tend to have been, most of the never Trumpers in the GOP. The Journo Goldbergs, the Bill Kristols. It is
interesting to see how much of what was the neocons? Were they the just war people? I don't remember.
I think that was part of it. Yeah.
It seems to me that there's a lot of self-sacrificial thinking going on here. Thinking about the Palestinians and what's good for them and making them free and all that. That's reminds me of what we were doing in the Iraq War.
I don't know that they necessarily say that, but they're some of them coming to the Palestinians' aid, was a reaction to Hamas just mowing down people trying to fill the power vacuum in the street. And one of the things that came up was all these people that were, chastising Israel for doing, for how they treated the Palestinians. Somehow, if Hamas kills Palestinian civilians in cold blood in the street, that's totally fine, and the world community isn't going to complain about that because, there's no Jew hating involved.
Yeah, it's a matter of emphasis. So if you don't like Israel, you emphasize all of the things you think are bad that Israel's doing. And then if you don't like Palestinians, you emphasize all the bad things they're doing, or Hamas. So I can understand like propaganda and rhetoric and, emphasizing the strengths and strengths of your side and the weaknesses of the enemy. But when you're trying to form some objective opinion about these things, you've got to take in the whole context and who is the better, which is the better side, which is the side that you want to win. And then you got to give them some leeway on how they fight that battle, because, war is an intense situation. It's like an emergency situation. You just got to do what you think is necessary to win. And if Hamas isn't surrendering, you aren't doing enough. So I give Israel a lot of leeway in how they conduct the war. Yes, I think there's going to be some atrocities because there's bad people in every army. But in a general sense, I don't think Israel is conducting a genocide. I think they have these goals, trying to defeat Hamas and get the hostages back. And they're flattening neighborhoods in order to do that because there's all these tunnel systems and they're dealing with an entrenched enemy.
A little of this goes back to our episode on Objectivist bluster on war, where they were talking about just like carpet bombing Gaza and, starving Gaza. Basically everything the global community was falsely accusing Israel of doing, some of the neocons or even ARI, they were saying that's what Israel should be doing. But in this last clip we have from them, they complain that a path to a potential two-state solution can't have a good outcome.
Will do, and it's what they say they want to do to Israel, and as they demonstrated when they get an opportunity, that was the attack of October 7th, they'll carry it out to whatever degree they're capable. And the idea that the world's reaction to that would be, yeah, maybe we should revive a two-state solution. Like maybe that's what we need to do. It's such a travesty of justice that if that view is taken seriously, you can't have a good outcome. It's hard. I mean, you can't project if October 7th didn't discredit them as the idea that, oh, maybe they should wield political power and we should view them as a political entity. Like a viable political entity. If that didn't discredit them, what could? And I think the answer is nothing. Nothing could. And that is, it is not just the appeasement of evil, but the embrace of evil. As, yeah, we've seen it and it doesn't matter to us.
Well, that's some high fancy rhetoric that I don't quite understand, because what has the whole war in Gaza been about? If you are appeasing evil, I mean, you wouldn't go to war with evil if you're appeasing them. I mean, you wouldn't, if you embrace evil, you're not going to go to war with them. So the plan is the result of that war. It's the the final outcome. And it's the result is getting hostages, living hostages. It's what was necessary to get the hostages back. And it's what's necessary to bring international pressure on Hamas to dissolve them as an entity, as a force, as a power. And that's language in the plan, is to strip them of all power. all influence in Gaza. He says that you can't have a good outcome. Well, and then in the beginning, in the first clip, he said this is the best solution. This is the good that you can achieve in this current context. So it seems like he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth a little bit. On one hand, it's the good that we can achieve. It's the best thing. But on the other hand, you can't get a good outcome out of it. So I don't know how you get bad from good.
I understand not wanting to reward terrorists after October 7th by giving them a path to statehood. But I mean, that's been part of the plan for years, like it or not. And the plan itself, one of the points says that, it's only after all these other phases and the interfaith dialogue that they'll start to look at a possibility of a Palestinian state. They kept it out there, but everything else has to be achieved. So if Hamas doesn't disarm, no Palestinian state. And frankly, what Israel's done is and I can put a clip up of it, but or a map, but they're basically going to control like 58% of Gaza still, and it's going to be in a much more manageable. You alluded to this earlier. They're kind of doing an East Berlin, West Berlin thing, where they're going to have Tony Blair and all the U.S. investment in southern Gaza, and then they're going to leave Hamas and they're being destitute in northern Gaza. And then what's going to happen is they're going to, see that if you go through a good vetting process, you can get into southern Gaza and be with those other Gazans that are living the good life, and then go back and the idea is that over time people won't want to live under Hamas, and that's how you at least try to make change.
Yeah, that's part of the plan that they don't seem to address here. It's the whole idea of phases. There are phases to the plan. Now Hamas can violate the terms of the plan, or they can go along with it. And ultimately, the two-state solution seems more like a three-state solution now. If they're going to split Gaza into two sections, then isn't that closer to whatever ideal Onkar and Elan want? It's going to be managed under some international body, and they're going to seek a more free area, and they're going to try to have economic growth. They're going to focus on returning the Rafah crossing, so that people can go back and forth between, Egypt and Gaza.
Right.
So that's a good goal, is you allow more freedom that way, and freedom of trade. And that's, in order to have the freedom of the trade, you got to let people be free in their daily lives to produce things. So,
and this part of this plan was put together of taking into account the situation on the ground in Hamas. Israel knows what they need to do to control things. And, by having this 58% of Gaza in their control, that I think they call it the ISF or something, but it's going to make it so, there can be a way for Gazans to see a different way of life. And what was Elan and Onkar's solution? Just rolling over the whole thing? We don't even know that was possible logistically. What would have to happen to actually just seize all of Gaza, and with no international community, and turning the whole international community against Israel? It's just,
well, there's the international public relations. That's one aspect to it. But in my opinion, the more self-interested issue for Israel is, how many soldiers are they going to lose going through these tunnels and rooting out Hamas? It's going to take lives, Israeli lives, to crush every living soul of Hamas. To find every little militant who's hiding somewhere with a bomb or a gun in his hand. So wouldn't you want to pursue some plan which peacefully disarms them, gets them to disarm and go away, and that even if that means some international body comes in and helps you out to clean up and reconstruct the area and then form a new government. Clearly, Gaza is a problem for Israel, and there needs to be some solution, other than throwing more bodies into the grinder and then just inflaming all of the feelings and negative attitudes towards Israel. I mean, Israel has to find a way to change the narrative and make them the heroes of this situation,
or at least not the villain.
Yeah.
And at the very least, but for Yaron Brook's part, chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute, he is much more skeptical about Kushner's deal about partitioning Gaza.
I said from the beginning that I don't think that the plan that they put together is doable. I don't think it's doable because Hamas does not want to disarm. Hamas does not want to give up control. And the only force that can actually get them to do that and has the capacity and the will to do that is Israel. And nobody wants Israel to go into Gaza and finish the job. Why? I do not know. It has to do more with PR than anything political. But I think everybody in the region would thank Israel if they actually did that. They won't admit that, but they would thank them at the end. So, the struggle is going to be how to keep Hamas out of the Israeli side. So the idea is to create a vetting program that Israeli authorities would lead, that would vet the Palestinians who wanted to move from the Hamas side to the Israeli side. We will see. We will see. But this is the plan that is evolving right now. The plan that it really does seem like Jared Kushner is pushing.
Well, Yaron likes to speculate a lot. It's his primary motivation. So, and he's also very negative, pessimistic. So it's not a surprise that he doesn't think the plan will work. And maybe it won't work, but I think it's a decent enough plan, and someone should give it a chance. Let it work its way out. Let it work its way through the points and the phases. He says that Hamas doesn't want to give up control. Well, they are on the verge of defeat. And if they don't give up control, they're going to face even more war, more terror and violence, and whatever Israel can do to flush them out.
And again, frankly, they've got the hostages back. Now Israel can do what they were going to do before. And these other Arab countries have signed off on it too, that Israel, if Hamas doesn't follow through, that Israel can take care of business. Whether or not they'll be able to do that or there's pressure, but I mean, give peace a chance.
Yeah, and regarding the PR battle, Yaron shrugs and doesn't know why people are against Israel. Well, Israel seems like they're trying to change that attitude with this plan. This plan will either get rid of Hamas or it will remind the world of how evil Hamas is. So if Hamas continues to engage in war and terrorize its civilians, then the world will look at that, and there'll be an international spotlight on it because of the plan, because of what Trump has done, and people will realize, all right, well, we got to get rid of this Hamas some way. So you got to create the motivation and the spirit, the will, the international will to support Israel. And I think this plan, in one way, is going to do that. One way or the other, it's going to do that. And I think that's why Israel supports the plan, because they see the long range benefit of this. It's a win-win for them either way. Of course, war is not necessarily a good thing, but if they get to conduct an all-out war after this peace plan fails, well, then the handcuffs are off. and they go in and they do what's necessary.
And they're ready.
Um,
They're blocking the borders, and the 42% of Gaza is going to be easier to police than 100% of it.
yeah, and especially if they get this divide, this two sections of Gaza, then it'll become even clearer to the international audience, how evil Hamas is.
I think that it was probably always the plan. They were never going to send Tony Blair to like North Gaza.
No. Well, part of the plan is to turn over areas that are free of terror and are peaceful. So they're not going to turn over any area that, or Israel won't turn over any area that isn't peaceful. So,
Yeah. I just, I mean, part of it is not only Trump's success, but also Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, just going back for a little inside baseball, I mean, when Yaron blocked me, it was because I was giving him a hard time about his hate of Netanyahu, which is right up there with his hate of Trump. And, ultimately, you say Yaron speculates, I speculate too. But, to the extent this deal is praised, it's implicitly a win for Trump and Bibi.
yeah, I think speculation has its place, but when you do it in the way that Iran does it, like just arbitrarily, like, he thinks that the plan isn't doable. Well, it's being done. It's happening. Yeah, there are like little violations here and there, but I mean, it's happening. The hostages got returned, so that's part of the plan.
Exactly.
So he thinks that some part down the road isn't doable. But we've seen that the plan is happening, and both sides signed on to at least the first phase, and things are happening. So it's being done.
Yeah. Well, great. I'm happy about it. It sounds like you're happy about it. Any final thoughts?
I think this is a monumental achievement. I mean, there's been strife between Israelis and Arabs and Muslims in that region for decades and decades, and I don't know how far it goes back, hundreds of years maybe. So what Trump has achieved to getting all this international support and get Egypt on the plan and Qatar on the plan.
Even Indonesia.
It's amazing how much international support he's getting. And the only detractors are these people who have this idealistic fantasy of what should happen. They're not grounded. I mean, they talk about Trump, being this dictator, but he had to do a lot of work in order to get all of these people to agree. You think all of the nations of the world are just going to bow down to some dictator in America? No, that's not how it works. Canada and France and other countries, they don't like Trump, but they're on board with this plan because they see the merits. And so I think it's a decent plan. I think it's a good plan. And we just need to get Hamas, we need to get enough pressure on Hamas to go along with this next phases, and especially to get them to disarm voluntarily. That would be a great achievement. And if that happens, how could you deny Trump a Nobel Peace Prize? I mean, that would be crazy.
Who is more likely to lean on Hamas hard, Trump or Harris, who actually had to pay like Oprah Winfrey, her own ally, $1 million for an endorsement? I mean, how is she going to negotiate with Hamas?
She couldn't, because her leftist base hates Israel, so she wouldn't be able to do anything. Trump has to contend with kind of a fringe anti-Israel element in the Republican Party, but most Republicans are on board, and most libertarians are on board with supporting Israel and ending this war.
There are some ANCAPs that don't like Israel, but be that as it may, I do think it's a lot of people like this. A lot of people that support Hamas are also not happy with this deal. And, they wouldn't be the people, Yaron and Elan and Onkar wouldn't be able to complain if Harris was in office, because the hostages would still be being held and there would still be this perpetual war.
It would be just a grind. You got these people entrenched in the tunnels, and you got to either just flatten entire cities or go into the tunnels and root them out.
Probably be Harris holding Bibi back, threatening aid if he went into Gaza.
There would be even more division, I think, between America and Israel, because Harris couldn't fully support Israel. So I don't know. I don't know what would happen. I don't like to speculate about things that will never happen since Harris wasn't elected. I just focus on maintaining the current context. That's another thing that I think Onkar and Elan and Yaron are not doing, is they're not maintaining the full context of the situation regarding this plan and regarding what's happening on the ground and what is in the best interest of Israel. I don't know if they're taking Israel's self-interest into account. They seem to have their own view of what's good. What's
they think they know better than the Israelis what's best for them.
They have this idea of justice, this vague, what's just for the victims and what's just for the Palestinians. Well, what's good? What's in the self-interest of Israel? And I never heard them talk about that. I suppose Yaron probably talks about it at some point, but in that video that we discussed with Onkar and Elan, they didn't really go into all that and what was in the self-interest of Israel, because what's in the self-interest of Israel is not necessarily in the self-interest of objectivists or in the self-interest of people at ARI. You have to look at it from the Israeli context. What is best for them? What's best is getting the hostages back and addressing the PR issue, which I think this plan does, and then ultimately trying to get Hamas to go away voluntarily, which is in the plan. So we'll see if that happens. So maintaining full context is critical here. And if you don't maintain the full context, especially all the 20 points in the plan, the different phases, then you're going to have this skewered, out of context fantasy world take on the situation.
The best deal possible is the best deal possible. A is A. Great. Well, I'm glad we talked about it. A lot of really good stuff. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.